This is one of my the fletch end of one of my reed hunting arrows, and I'm going to show you guys some techniques I use. One thing that will help keep these feathers from lifting away from the shaft. That's one problem I see, that a lot of people, when they make their own arrows, especially if they're wrapped at either end with sinew as this one is, these feathers will tend to lift off away from the shaft. And there's a little technique I've got to where we can eliminate that. This is the fletch end of a river cane hunting arrow that I make. Here's the back end of a river cane shaft. Now, one thing that I do is before I fletch these things, I measure out where my fletching is going to be, and I take a stone knife like this and score these edges. You want to score them with this so that when you wrap this thing with sinew, it's really got something to grip. So that's what I do both at the front and the back end. The knock end here, also score this with a stone blade. You don't want to go too deep, but you want it to be rough enough that that sinew's got something to grip on in there. And the next thing I do is I sand with about 80 or 100 grit sandpaper. I sand this area in between the sinew wraps like this, kind of scratch it up, because when I glue these feathers down, I want these things to grip onto the shaft. This is one that I did just the other day. You see it's wrapped at the back end with sinew, and the sinew is dried. Now we've got our feathers loose. Okay, I've got this little cup of water. This is basically a shot glass. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this thing in between my legs, dip my finger in this water, and run it underneath the quill of these feathers. What you're doing with this is you're wetting this quill and you're lengthening this feather out to the maximum length that it will ever be. And you want to do this for a couple of minutes. Just really make sure you get these things wet and make sure that they're thoroughly saturated. And do that to all three feathers. Okay, our feathers have been soaked and the quill's been thoroughly hydrated now. And the next step is to wrap the front ends down. So what I do is I've got a piece of sinew here that's been soaked and chewed, and want to wrap that so that it overlaps itself, kind of holds itself on there. Now I hold it in my teeth, take the first feather, and I'm going to secure it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it forward just a little bit. I really want to stretch that feather out until its sinew holds that first one down, that first feather, and bring in another one. And then there's number 3. So you want that feather secured, all 3 of them. Then try to make sure that these things have about the same amount of helix on them, twist on them, as the other ones. And then you'll see as I do this, I'm pulling these feathers. Each time I wrap this sinew, I pull these feathers. And I try to pull my sinew kind of tight. Wrap a few more times. Keep pulling and wrapping. And next what I'm going to do is take my little obsidian flake here and trim this quill of this feather off at an angle. And these quills are wet and soft, so they actually trim quite easily. See, it's trimmed at an angle there. And then just finish wrapping out my sinew. And then tuck it under itself. There we go. Pull it nice and tight. And now we set it aside to let it dry. Okay, it's been a couple hours now, and the feather has dried and the sinew up front here is dried. First thing I like to do is I take some scissors and just trim these feathers, because what I'm going to do is when I glue these down, I want to be able to get that thread that's going to hold them tight against the shaft. I want to be able to get that in there, and it's a little easier to do it if you trim the edges of your feathers. Just use this scissors here. And it's just doesn't have to be much, just enough to kind of neaten them up a little bit. Now, my preferred method of gluing these feathers down is with hide glue. When you apply it to the underside of these feathers here, it seems to run along the quill underneath, in between the quill and the shaft, and it really works well. But today we're going to fudge and just use some Elmer's wood glue, trying to do this in a timely manner instead of spending all day on it. What I have here is just basically a split small shish kebab stick, and I use, this one's rounded, I just use this, put a little dab on my end of my stick there, sort of pull these feathers to the side a little bit, and just apply that glue up underneath there, and we'll just follow that quill, put a nice coating of glue on the underside of that. And I do that to all three of the feathers, and I've wrapped the back end here with a strand of thread. And now what I do is just use this as a spiral wrap to hold these feathers down against the shaft while the glue dries. And what I do is I just use a knife here, so to split the web of the feather, and then run that thread down through there, and try to keep my fingers in between here so I'm not squishing these feathers. Go to the next one and continue this wrap all the way down till I get to the forward sinew wrap. Alright, we're finishing up the wrapping here. Just took a few minutes. Just cutting through that, actually not cutting, just splitting the web of the feather, and then wrapping our thread around it. Now if you really wanted to, you could leave this thread on here, but I prefer to take it off. It's not really that necessary. Once you get the glue on here, these feathers will stay glued down really well. And that's it. So now I'll go ahead and wrap this, and I don't tie it off or anything. I just wrap it with a couple wraps here to ensure that it'll hold itself. And now you can see we've got that entire feather wrapped down nice and tight. And now we just have to let this glue dry, and then we'll do the final trimming. It's been about an hour or so, and the glue should be dry. So now we're just going to take this thread wrapping off of here, and there's our arrow. Now feathers are kind of messed up a little bit, but I'll just go through and work them back together. Just start cutting these feathers from the back. I just sort of taper them towards the front. Sort of use my finger to help guide the scissors. And I'll probably clean them up a little bit later on. I mean, it looks like hell right now, but there's an arrow. Fletching down, it's ready to go.